Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for giving me an extra week so that I could do this great trip to Taiwan. Please, if you can hear me, could you please type yes so that I know everything's working? Yes, 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 yes. Thank you. Yes, yes. Carol Morgan and I had a wonderful trip to Taiwan. We were 2 days traveling, 2 days recovering from traveling, and 5 days channeling and driving around Taiwan, which was a wonderful experience. We were treated like royalty, and it was very exciting to see the Taiwanese publishing location, and we did a 2-hour channeling session there. So it was all wonderful, and people are very excited about the work. So that was incredible, really. Did take us a couple of days to recover, sleeping at strange times. Okay, let's get to it. I'm going to bring Jesus through, and before we get to the questions that you all have posed, he's going to say his introduction. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, I'm just getting to check something here. All right, no, we're all good. You are blessed beings indeed, and I am that one that you know as Jesus. And as you know, we are very happy that you are with us and that you have decided to focus your mind away from the many distractions on your planet to this global family that we are so pleased to be encouraging and nourishing and sharing in. It is a great pleasure for us to have so many beings who are participating in the healing of the collective consciousness of this planet. And this is the most important thing for you all to understand right now, that you are not just working on yourself, you are working and gifting your loving thoughts and ideas to everyone on this plane at this time. So there are some confusing things going on in your hearts and minds at this time. And the main one that we want to address are the other teachings that are coming through other beings that this channel is channeling. Now, much of this confusion is coming because there has been a very limited view on your planet of what spirituality is and where these messages might be coming from. And as we go through your awakening process, as you go through your consciousness expansion, there are going to be things that begin to arise in your experience that have not been discussed, that you have not been prepared for by older texts. Now, when A Course in Miracles was channeled, you must remember this was 50 years ago on your planet. Just think of the transformation in technology, in philosophy, in cultural teachings that your society has gone through. Those messages were universal and are still universal. The teachings about forgiveness, the teachings about how the ego works, the teachings about information and how the mind, how separation came into being and how it functions, are all universal teachings that are timeless. But as you are coming to understand, some of the societal and cultural teachings of the time were quite different than they are now. So how do we deal as universal teachers with a changing cultural milieu, with a changing cultural paradigm? Well, we move with the times. Otherwise, you end up with an archaic system that is not flexible, that is not speaking to the experience you are having now. And this is what's happening with the increase, the escalation in energies that are happening now, as well as the opening up of your society to a more truthful history. Extraterrestrial beings could not be mentioned 50 years ago. Channelers who were channeling and opening up these highways of communication could not talk about extraterrestrials 50 years ago. It was an impossibility. They would not have even been heard. And so to look back 50 years ago and say, well, if extraterrestrials exist and some of them have valid messages, then they should have been talked about back then, is an idealistic way of looking at things. We had to bring messages through to the best of our ability in a way that they could be heard. And we had to work with the minds in the way that they had been trained as a starting point. Your minds now are very, very different than the minds of beings in your society 50 years ago. And so it is very, very important to allow information to come through that is more in alignment with the frequency of your planet at this time, with the transformation as a society that you've gone through and the results that you see at this time. And so when you look at this being offering up teachings, now she is not in charge of these teachings. She does not decide who comes through, when they come through, or what they say. She simply does not. She is just like a telephone. And it is important for all of you to understand that. It is important for all of you to understand that there have been secrets kept from you that have in many ways made your minds very, very narrow. But we had to start with those narrow minds and use what you believe to be true as access points to a greater expanded vision of your universe. And that's what we've been doing. We did not allow extraterrestrials publicly through this being and did not promote that aspect of this teaching 3, 4, 5, even 6 years ago, because that was not going to serve the overall trajectory of this teaching. You all have had your minds expanded tremendously through the work that this being has brought through. Most of you would not have listened to it had extraterrestrial beings been broadcasting through her. It would not have happened. So are we being deceptive? Well, the ego mind would say we're being deceptive. We say what we're doing is we are using the most appropriate forms of communication to get the conversation to continue. But what is happening now is a moment in history when you are going to begin to have disclosure from your governments. And if you are not prepared by spiritual teachers, by higher frequency beings, to expect and to prepare for those communications, you are not going to be well served. So for those of you that feel that there is some kind of betrayal or some kind of shenanigans going on here, that is not what is going on at all. There simply has come a moment in your development, in your evolution, where this reality that you are not alone in the universe has to be dealt with. And it is a fundamental teaching in your society that Earth is the be-all and end-all of everything. And if you don't believe that, then you're a crazy person. And that is how the governments have kept you in this very, very limited paradigm that has caused you a lot of dysfunctional behavior, to be truthful. Some of the arrogance of humanity has come from the teachings that God is only at play on this planet and nobody else exists except empty space and a few bacteria perhaps on some distant planet somewhere. And that is not the case at all. This universe is full of life, full of intelligent life, full of all kinds of different frequencies of life. And it is time now for you to accept that truth. It is not a question. It is the truth. And so the addition of extraterrestrial transmissions through this being are to your benefit, because it is only going to increase from all directions over the next few years. And we want you to know that the foundations of love and self-examination and forgiveness that you have gone through as Course in Miracles students have wonderfully prepared you for disclosure, for this opening up of what is reality. It is as if you have been kept in a box and the lid is coming off, and you're going to stand up and see that you were in a box and you didn't know it. You thought it was the only thing there was. And so we consider this being's willingness to transmit this information, even though it does also make her uncomfortable at times. We want to thank her for being brave enough to step out and do this. And you're going to always have the choice to just hang out with us here on the live streaming, as long as our dear one decides to do this, and she is free at any time to stop. She has more than met the requirements for this assignment, this particular facet of her assignment. And she may very well at some point in the future decide that this is enough live streaming and that this ministry needs to change. It is up to her. She is a free will being. We can only thank her from the bottom of our collective hearts for the work she has done so far. So if you aren't interested in extraterrestrial transmissions because they make you uncomfortable, then you are free to just hang out here on these transmissions, because we have decided that that is all that will be transmitted here, is Ananda's work and my work, so that you have a place to come if the ET factor is too much for you. Other beings are so excited about the ET factor because their guidance system and their guides and teachers have been talking to them and have been getting them for years to look at this information, and they have a tremendous hunger for clarification on these subjects. And so if you wish to view it this way, there can be seen as a fork in the road here for those of you that do not wish to entertain any information from other beings and feel that it compromises this being's integrity, but it does not. It is merely an idea in the mind that tells that story. And so we will assure you here that there is a great plan, a great long-term plan for this ministry that will, in the end, look quite different than it does now. So try not to get attached to the way things are. Understand that adaptability and expansion naturally bring change, naturally bring new experiences. And that just as you do not stay in grade 1 for 20 years, you will not stay in the beginning stages of this teaching for 20 years. It will continue to grow and expand. But we want to reiterate here that the teachings of A Course in Miracles are the foundational elements for bringing peace to your mind, which opens up your consciousness to knowledge. Now, what is knowledge? Knowledge is the truth. And you all have not been given the truth. You have not been given the truth that there are other civilizations and societies that are far older than yours and far more evolved than yours. It simply hasn't been allowed to filter down through your monitoring systems and control systems. So when you get access to knowledge, you get access to the truth. And that can be a big story, much bigger than you're used to hearing. So this, we hope this clarifies things for you. And as for the Holy Spirit is that connecting medium between the ego mind and the truth. And so the Holy Spirit will come to you in many, 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 many forms. It can come through another human being's voice. Someone across the table from you at a dinner party may be inspired to say something by the Holy Spirit that is specifically for you, and yet it will seem to come through another human being. The Holy Spirit can use anything in your dream world to access you, if that seems to be the best access point for new information and for expansive, energy enhancing truth. So it can be a pet, it can be the weather, it can be a dream, it can be anything. The Holy Spirit will use whatever you allow into your consciousness as the messaging system. So this is just about expanding what you believe to be allowable. It is about knowing that many of the fears and discomforts you feel around extraterrestrial contact are because of the society's trainings that anyone who is involved in this kind of work is crazy, delusional, unreliable, unprofessional. This is how they've kept the secret going for such a long time. You know that if you speak up, someone will make fun of you, someone will point the finger at you, and someone may even attack you. And so this is why it is a very, very triggering subject for most of you, because of the teachings that your society has given you around this particular form. We will take a little break, give our dear one a drink, and we will return shortly. All right. We have a little sip of we had a few questions come through today, so we've got a nice selection. I have a question for Jesus and or Ananda in the next live stream. I know I'm a little ahead of things, but this question formed as I have been reading about sin and error in A Course in Miracles. Jesus and Ananda, please discuss the fall from grace as taught by the Church and its perceived relation to sin and guilt versus the decision, for example, by me to come into duality to experience separation and its perceived relation to sin and guilt. Okay, let us see what Ananda says about sin and guilt and the fall from grace. We're with you again, dear ones. And as we always say, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us not only in this moment, but of course in your prayers, in your meditations, and in our wonderful, wonderful discussions and interactions with you throughout your day. Many of you reach out to us. We speak with many of you, guide many of you throughout your day, hinting at things that might be a good idea, nudging you down a particular street, inspiring you to call somebody that you need to speak to, all kinds of things. But we are always in accord with your free will, your higher self, that oversoul that is the guiding force of all your incarnations, will never be overridden, and it is always edging you towards love, always edging you towards circumstances, people, places, things, and experiences that will give you an opportunity to see something more clearly about yourself that you have not yet realized. So how does the fall from grace translate into these teachings? Well, when you think back to how the Church's teachings were developed, they listened to Jesus. And Jesus was teaching about the separation. And as we have mentioned, and Jesus has mentioned many, many times, the Church took those teachings and changed them a bit here and there, edited a little bit out here and there, threw in some blatant lies, and brought together a text that was truthful intermittently, partly truthful most of the time, and blatant lies intermittently as well. As we have said, just like putting a bitter pill in a spoonful of honey, you cannot get a child to take a bitter pill, but if you disguise it in sweetness, you can. And that is really what happened with the Bible. Now, what is separation? Separation is a lack of love, and that is all that sin is, a lack of love. And that was a translational issue You must remember the Bible was not written in English. It's had many iterations of different languages and different scribes and different translations and different agendas behind those translations and scribes. And so it is, the word sin means missing the mark. That was the original definition of the word that in the original text. So things like missing the mark, separation, sin are slight variations on interpretation based on point of view. Just as if 10 of you sit around and decide, well, let's discuss love, let's talk about our definition of love, you're going to come up with 10 different definitions, even though you all think you're talking about the same thing. You'll find that you're not talking about the same thing, and that one person's definition of love can literally be the opposite of somebody else's definition of love. So words are symbols of symbols, and poor ones at that sometimes, because you don't define with each other what these words mean. So the idea of original sin separating from love was exactly that, exactly what that is. It was a mistake, a sin, missing the mark. It was a removal from love, a separation from God. That is what we talk about. That is what Jesus talks about in A Course in Miracles. And it is a fall from grace in that sense, because most of you feel so separated from love and God that you don't feel that you have any grace in your life. You don't feel a connection to the divine anymore, especially with your society's trainings. And so you go deeper and deeper into fear, deeper and deeper into separation, until you're barely functioning and suffering so much that you realize that you're off track, that you are committing a sin, you are off the mark, you are suffering. That is the basic idea. It's different ways of saying the same thing, but the church used it in a different way than Jesus intended for it to be used. It was used as a justification for punishment, as a justification for guilt and shame and oppression and control, none of which were right, none of which were true. These were distortions by human egos in the early development of church doctrine and church rules. And those rules continue to change throughout the millennia and continue to be used for political, financial, and controlling purposes. So guilt was used shamelessly by the church as a method of control. So you should feel guilty just because you're here, that you are an original, you are born in sin, and all of these nasty connotations. But as you see, if you really study A Course in Miracles, these are founded in a little bit of what is actually going on. Separation from love does cause suffering. You are missing the mark. You would be considered sinful if you actually look at that definition of the word. Guilt and shame come from not knowing how the laws of creation work. So you're taught that this thing, this separation thing, is an error, it's bad. Instead of teaching you how to reverse it, which is what the Course in Miracles lessons do, the church took advantage of you by repeatedly telling you that you were separate from God, that you were sinful, and that you were bad for having this experience, that the body was sinful. If you think about it, we tell you, and Jesus tells you through the Course in Miracles, that the body is a symbol of separation. It is used by the ego as a weapon and as a god, an idol. And therefore it is of the ego. Therefore it is of separation. Therefore it is of sin in the missing the mark, separated from love kind of way. It is not who you are. It is a symbol of what you have mistakenly thought yourself to be, an individual, alone, helpless, abandoned by God. That is what it symbolizes. But from our point of view, the body is not sinful. It is not evil. It is not to be avoided. It is merely not to be worshipped or to be looked upon as the be all and end all of your existence. And the story about the resurrection is also distorting the body story. This idea that the body of Jesus was healed from the dead, it was remanufactured by Jesus' consciousness at that time. It was not the same body. And it was a demonstration of the valuelessness of the body, not the value of the body, which is what the church used it for, to say that he sacrificed the body means that it would have had some value. And that was the exact opposite of what he was teaching. So really, these words are the same. The fall from grace is the separation. The sin is a lack of love, and guilt and shame are the ego's ways of manipulating you into self-doubt and powerlessness. And they were the church's ways of manipulating you into self-doubt and powerlessness so that they could have the reins of control. So we hope this clarifies things a bit. Don't be too worried about it. If you do the lessons of A Course in Miracles, if you do your forgiveness practice on a regular basis, whenever you get upset with someone and you own your part in it, and you see that you are the creator of the feelings within you because of the beliefs you hold and the stories you tell, then these things will slowly fade away and you will get relief from this shame-filled and guilt-filled indoctrination that your society has had. We will return shortly. Right. Okay, I'm gonna have a little sip. We are all blessed. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Question for live streaming. Can Jesus and Ananda help us understand the distinction between individuality as created by God in reference to one mind and one Son of God, and self-concept at God, and self-concept, personality separation as we perceive ourselves to be, as explained in A Course in Miracles? I think there's a bit of an error in the question because it says between individuality as created by God. My understanding is that God did not create individuality, but I could be wrong. I'm going to read this again because it's a bit of a complicated question. Can Jesus and Ananda help us understand the distinction between the individuality as created by God in reference to one mind and one Son of God, and self-concept, personality separation as we perceive ourselves to be? All right, let's see what Jesus says about that. You are blessed beings indeed, and it is wonderful to hear the variety of questions that come from your group. Well, the idea of individuality as created by God is indeed a little bit of an error, a significant error. In fact, most of the stories you have about spirit, soul, individual incarnations are really distorted by your belief in separation and your experience in an individuated body. It is impossible almost, unless you've had a revelatory experience, to truly comprehend what oneness is and what it feels like. You get small glimpses of it when you are, for example, pregnant. A person who's pregnant feels such a profound connection at times with that little one that they understand that they are almost one. Sometimes you'll get it in sexual encounters where the mind blends. It's not the body that's blending, even though they do connect, of course. But in that intense moment of feeling one with the other person, it is not the body that's doing it. It is the mind that's doing it. It is a defenseless mind that has taken down all barriers to blending. And so there will be a feeling of oneness, but it's very short-lived very often. And so this is why it's such a painful experience here for you because of the seeming separation from love, the seeming separation from God, the seeming separation from each other. And so really, it is important for you to understand that there is no separation once you get up into the higher frequencies. Now, there is a place in between incarnations where you have the small ego self fall away. That means that the resistances, the blocks, the barriers to love within an individual ego mind will fall away as you go through the dying process, or the awakening process, if you want to call it that. Really, it is not dying at all. You will see more clearly, you will have your life review, and you will come to understand where you made good decisions and less loving decisions, and you will be counseled and taught and shepherded through that process of coming to understand what you did and didn't learn in your lifetime, what you accomplished and what you failed to accomplish given your blueprint. But that is not a true blending. It is still a personality aspect, if you will. It is still that individuated incarnation going through the final stages of the clarification process in the sense of what happened in your incarnation and how well did you do. Souls are not what you think they are. For example, in the blending together of consciousness at higher realms, there is a loss of that individual personality, if you will. This communication, for example, is a focusing down, a remembering, a recalibrating from oneness, from connection, from a deep communion with all that is, down into a structure that can communicate with you about that particular life experience that was had 2,000 years ago. Why is this important for you to understand? Well, if you think that we are all in our old bodies, dressed in our old-fashioned clothes, wandering around being individual, then you are incorrect. We are not doing that. We can appear to you in that form as a way of facilitating communication with you, because if we show up in a form that you understand, then you may be willing to open up to that particular communication. Sometimes we will show up in forms that are nothing to do with our incarnational selves as you understand them to be. As I have mentioned before, I have shown myself to some of you in a female form because to show myself as Jesus would not have served the communication. And it may well have overwhelmed you to such a degree that you would have fallen to your knees and been unable to learn the lesson. So the separation that you experience here is very different than the experience of oneness. And you are not equipped to truly experience oneness here, because everything about this place is embodying and strengthening and enabling you to experience the separation that you chose to experience. And so what the body that you find yourself in, the senses are constantly narrowing down into separation. The time you believe in constantly narrowing down into separation. We want you to envision a funnel again, where the bottom is very, very narrow, and you would be that little point at the end that's experiencing your life in 3D reality. And as you go up the funnel, it simply gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and contains more and more and more and more and more. And so as you become more evolved, you connect with more and more and more and more until you are everything. that individuation at the bottom of the funnel is a very, very specific experience that you have chosen to have. So God did not create individuals in that sense. That is a mythology that has come down through the dualistic teachings on your planet, and it represents the frequency of this place. We, as teachers, are always encouraging you to go further up the funnel using forgiveness practice as the source of energy for that ascension up through the little narrow part of the tunnel. And that is where most of you are right now. Still very narrow, still very focused, still very contained in that limited 3D position. But some of you now, after the course and after practicing for a while, are beginning to see the expansion of that funnel shape. You are beginning to connect more and more with those higher realms, less and less with the judgmental lower realms. And that is what we want to encourage all of you to do as you go up through that narrow part of the funnel. There is a little journey there, and we're going to address a question that one of you have around this idea of the lessons of A Course in Miracles not doing it for you or not making you feel perfect. Well, that's because you're in the bottom levels of that narrow part of the funnel, and you are really undoing some very, very basic and superficial aspects of your conditioning programs, and you have a long way to go. You must remember that the lessons are not an instant fix. They are a clarification process. What does that mean? It means a clarification process is preparing you for the work. It is not the work in and of itself, and this is something that is generally not pushed too much on you in the beginning, because a year of study and all of the lessons are enough for you to think about. It is a tremendous learning feat that you have accomplished here, and to undo that tremendous learning feat takes a while, takes a lot of practice. And if you've fallen off the wagon a few times and you go back to the lessons because you see you can't be left unsupervised, that you are going to end up in trouble, then those are not wasted slips. They are not sins. They are nothing to be guilty about. They are merely the demonstration of the powerful teachings of your society and how well indoctrinated you have been. So for those of you that are still struggling with, we could even say mental illness, but we say most of you are struggling with mental illness. Some of you are more blatant about it. Some of you are what you would consider depressed or bipolar or schizophrenic or something like that, that fits into a label in your society. And so you call it mental illness, but really the entire fabric of your society is delusional. You're going to come to see this over the next few years. You're going to come to see the depths of the propaganda that you've been indoctrinated with. And this is why, back to our original statement, we have had to go slowly and surely through these foundational teachings for you. Because once you're connected, once you're tapped into love, once you begin to see that you are the creator of your suffering, once you begin to see that you are connected all the time and that messages come through all kinds of places, then you become prepared for even greater expansion. But it is a never-ending building block system from small to greater to greater to greater. So yes, you feel separated in those lower realms of the funnel. Yes, there's a little straight bit at the bottom of a funnel that really, really represents quite well that first journey through the Course in Miracles, because you are still really focused. You're still feeling very separated. You're still often very confused. You're still being surrounded by people who are bringing you reflections that you don't like. You're still confused about your work. and yet you have to continue to do the forgiveness practice and step up each day into the best you can be, given what you believe. But there will come a point where the narrowing of the funnel now goes into expansion, and we encourage you to focus on that point, knowing that there's a little bit of a slog to get there. The first few years for this being on her journey with A Course in Miracles were not easy at all. She had created some situations that were not easy to fix. And so she had to live with some of those distortions that her untrained mind had manufactured. She had to come to terms with some of them. And it was very, very difficult time for her. And this went over a period of several years, not because the Course in Miracles doesn't work, but because of the strength of her belief in some of these areas, because of the situations that she caused by some of her distortions. Same for some of you. You may be married and you may be unhappily married, ensconced in a mortgage with young children around you, and you may think, my goodness, what have I got here? What have I made for myself here? And those things are not easy to get out of in a graceful way, in a loving way, very quickly. And so patience is important. Infinite patience brings immediate results. That means that when you accept where you are and you try to make the best of it, because you can't change things instantaneously, lucky for you, because a lot of you would be creating worse things if it was instantaneous. When you accept where you are for now and say, well, let me look around at this place. Let me assess how happy I am truly. Let me see what's going on. That is a really great gift for yourself, so that you are not beating yourself up for not being better, for not being further along. And for the particular young person who is struggling with mental health issues, we want you to know that you are not alone. This is a crazy-making place. You are doing the right thing by doing the lessons, but don't judge the shadows that are still in your mind as a demonstration of a failure of A Course in Miracles, but rather as a demonstration of the success of the propaganda in your society. Allow time, allow space for these lessons to work their magic, and do your part, which is to do them as described, whether or not you like them, whether or not you understand them, and you will begin to have a different experience. We will return shortly. All right. Okay, a little sip here. This is another question from Carl, but I thought it was a good one, so we'll look at it. I wonder how mentally unstable people can create such beautiful things. I'm thinking about professions we usually call creative, although I realize almost every profession could be creative. So many people seem to be mentally unstable that create some form of art. How come? Or perhaps it's the fame that may come with it that breaks them down? Question mark. Good question. Being a crazy artist myself. Okay, let's ask Ananda. We're with you again, dear ones. This is a very good question, because we do ask you to develop your creativity. And this idea that artists are crazy is actually one of the cogs in the wheel of the propaganda machine. Because remember, we've told you that creativity is a wonderful, wonderful place for us to connect with you. And the powers that be know this, that spirit uses creativity to connect, to give information, to inspire, to bring through concepts that are loving and healing and teaching. This is one of the reasons why in your schools art is not given front and center focus. So if you think about it, from the time you're young, you will hear the two prominent ideas about artists: that they are flaky and unreliable at best, and a little crazy at worst, and that artists are starving. So this is part of the propaganda machine to get you not to do art, to get you to dismiss it as not worthy in some way, or a treacherous, murky ground in which to travel. There is an interesting correlation. A lot of people who are creatives, who are artists, have refused to bow down to the indoctrination programs of getting a serious job and working for money, selling your soul, if you will. And so they have a rebellious streak, and a rebellious streak in your society is always called crazy. So again, it's part of that propaganda machine. Now, when you are not at a regular job, when you are under the stress of having unpredictable income, when you are delving into the creative aspects of the mind, you are looking at a less structured existence, and you are looking at a less predictable existence. And so one of the things that causes artists to seem erratic, to perhaps seem unstable, is that they are coping with not only the judgments sometimes from their families, from themselves as well, but they are also trying to deal with an unforgiving society when it comes to money, when it comes to rent. This being, for example, really had no access to any kind of credit when she was a working artist, because she didn't have a predictable income, even though she did relatively well at it and supported herself. A bank would not touch her in terms of buying a car payment, for example, would not touch her for a credit card so that she could travel. So she chose to follow the art because she was guided to do so by us. It was a very strong teaching from this side. But she had to deal with people, sometimes landlords, not being able to get their rent exactly on time. This whole system is set up and based on you having a regular job and a regular paycheck. And for those of you that are brave enough to break out of it, we say kudos to you. We say, well done. And yes, you can look a little erratic sometimes. You can get a little frightened when your money's not coming in because you haven't sold a piece of artwork, or somebody has decided that the commission they gave you, they don't like it, and so they're not going to pay you. These are very stressful things. And when you have stress upon stress upon stress, now these people are not living separate from your society, although sometimes they try to do that. They're trying to live in society that wants them to conform, that wants them to pay their bills on time. And it is getting worse and worse for anyone who wants to break free because of your credit score systems that punish you and restrict you from investments and certain freedoms when you are not making that payment on the exact date that you're meant to pay it. So this is why artists may seem a little less than stable. But the truth is, if we look at the energy systems of these beings, they are actually more in tune, generally speaking, not always, but more in tune, generally speaking, with their guides and teachers. They are getting communications through image, through inspiration. They are functioning at a higher frequency, unless the stresses of being an artist in this society really are too much for them, and they turn to drugs and alcohol, or they become so financially fearful that they can't function and the anxiety is too much for them. So we say to all of you, look at your beliefs around artists and art and creativity and ask if you have some prejudices there and some fears there. This is a very good time to address that, because we again reiterate that your creativity is one of the best places for you to relax and focus And in a relaxed and focused mind, we have a lot easier time of it. Connecting with you, bringing imagery through. Remember, words are not our strong point. It is because you are focused on words and you are trained in particular ways that we use these formats for you. This teaching, this looking at a teacher format, but we can access each of you with images, ideas, feelings, inspirations, and creativity, of course, hones those, gets you to stop, gets you to open up, gets you to go inside, gets you to feel your way through things. And this, of course, is one of the reasons why many of you go to do art and then have difficulty, because it is, in fact, a foreign language for you. Your training programs have shut these intuitive, creative systems down, and we are encouraging you to go there. But if you have a belief that artists are crazy and poor, then you are not going to feel open to stepping towards that as an aspect of your future. So just be aware of those prejudices, and if you feel them come up, which you will when you go to paint or write or draw or sing or write a song, you are going to feel those things. You're going to hear things in your mind like, this is a waste of time. I'm never going to be able to make any money at this. People are going to think I'm crazy if I draw this image or sculpt this sculpture. You'll hear the voices of the conditioning programs. And of course, that's why we love you to try new things, because when you try new things, those voices come up in your mind and you see why you've not been doing them before, because you have programs that tell you not to. So whatever small foray you can make into creativity, do it and listen to those negative voices and you will hear the programs. This is one wonderful way of coming to understand yourself more deeply, and the motivation behind some of the absences in your life. If you feel that you are missing something in your life, I'm not talented, I don't have any creative skill, that is a blatant lie, and it won't make you feel good. And that's what that guidance is saying to you. It's not true. You need to look at this another way. Those are simply conditioned beliefs and ideas that you have been indoctrinated with and have taken into your mind as a truth. So support your local artists. Know that it takes great courage to be an artist. It takes great revolutionary spirit to be an artist. They work alone a lot of the time with insecure finances. Don't begrudge them what they charge for a piece of artwork. Encourage them, encourage your children, and encourage yourself to be creative. And it won't make you mad. It'll just make you more connected. Okay, I'm gonna have a little sip of my lemon. Oh, this is a very good one. Question for the next live streaming on the subject of organ transplantation. Can organ donors or organ recipients suffer damage in their energetic bodies? Can life after death be disturbed by organ transplantation? Never thought of that. Thank you, whoever asked that. I didn't write the name down. Okay, let's ask Jesus what he thinks of this. You are blessed beings indeed, and your bodies are not who you are. However, you have very, very strong beliefs about your bodies, and so those beliefs can create. So that's really the answer. Too short, but we'll go into some more details here. If you die in a car crash and you have bequeathed your heart as an organ donor, and somebody needs your heart and they get your heart. The consciousness of each of you come into play. That would be considered a karmic relationship where you are swapping body parts. Very, very intimate act. And so each of you would have preconceived notions and ideas about what that means, what the effects might be, whether it's good or bad, whether you are lucky or unlucky, whether you are kind or whether you are being taken advantage of. All kinds of concepts and ideas are going to be embedded in the consciousness of each of those beings. Now, as you know, your body is manufactured from your consciousness. That is what enlivens the body. That is what causes the body to develop new cells. That is what defines those cells. There's all kinds of consciousness active in the body. It's not just coming from the brain. There is scientific proof that if you have a negative thought, for example, spontaneously throughout your body, negative destructive chemicals arise, not from an organ necessarily, but just from nothing. They come into being. So consciousness resides throughout every single tiny part of your body, and it is not only focused in the head. It is not only focused in your thoughts. It is not only focused in your organs. It is everywhere, permeating everything, changing all the time in relation to what you hold to be true about reality. And this is where healing comes from, and this is where sickness comes from. If you are constantly swimming in a sea of negativity because of the thoughts that you are allowing and believing in your consciousness, your body will be stressed out and it will create sickness. If your mind is focused on loving thoughts and concepts, forgiving ideas, is gentle and loving, gentle and sweet in its nature, then you are constantly going to be bathed in healthful chemicals that encourage growth and healing. So these organs that get swapped between people do have some kind of memory for a little while until they are infused with the energy system of the new consciousness, until they are pumped full of the blood from that new consciousness. There is a little bit of a hangover period. And if you read about that, organ donors sensing the previous owner's beliefs or cravings, that is what is going on. The consciousness is transported from one body to another through the cellular structure of that organ very, very quickly. Plop, the heart's in the new body. And so until that cellular structure is completely reintegrated or integrated into the new body, there will be a sort of hangover connection. As far as spirit goes, no, there's no interference with any kind of evolution. In fact, having a heart transplant, if you are the recipient of it, can give you a very unique experience and can enhance your ability to align with love. It can make you very grateful for the life you have and the opportunities that you are afforded through the body. Because when a body fails, as you know, when you're lying in bed with flu or you've got a migraine headache or you've broken your foot, whatever's going on, that is when you appreciate the body the most, when you can't use it for a little while. So many of these beings that have organ transplants are very, very, very grateful and appreciative for their lives after this experience. And so in that sense, it's a very karmic, it's a very positive karmic experience relationship. But no, if you go to your grave missing an organ, it doesn't matter, because the body is not you. The life force is not contained within that organ. It is that organ, if you take it out of the donor body, will last a very, very short time without spirit infusing it. And so that is why organ donations have to be done so quickly. That is why organs have to be preserved in ice, because it stops the deterioration that would naturally take place. And it is because it's disconnected from spirit. There is consciousness in those cells. That is enough to keep it going for a few minutes, a little while. But you better get it hooked up to another consciousness. Otherwise, it's not going to survive that trip. And so it is the consciousness that is at play, and the consciousness is whole. When you pass over, your consciousness leaves your body. There is a vegetative state that humans can be kept in with your modern day instruments, and that can be a little troublesome for the departed's energy, spirit, body, because there is a connection to that body still, and they aren't able to really move on. Now, of course, you hear about these ideas of people who are in comas for a very, very long time. But a coma is different than life support system. A coma is when a consciousness has decided to vacate the body for a while and is off doing other things, but it has not yet ended its life here on the earth. When you're kept alive by machines, when you're technically brain dead, unable to live without those machines, spirit has moved on, but there is this vegetative state that can be maintained. So there are a few different variables in there, but we want you to know that you don't have to worry about being an organ donor. It's a very, very loving thing to do in this frequency plane, to give a body part that you're not going to use anymore and potentially allow someone to finish out their life is a very kind thing. Are you interfering? Well, yes and no. Anybody who leaves, anyone who is ready to leave your earth plane will leave when they are ready, whether they're 2 weeks old or 20 years old or 60 years old. If it's their time to go, they'll go. So if the heart recipient wants to stay, then they will accept the heart and they will not reject it biologically, and they will continue on their incarnation with this new experience. And that may be what they have decided they would like to experience. If they want to be out of here, then their body will reject the heart and they will die. And so there's an infinite number of variables depending on what the donor and the recipient are up to in their karmic relationship, in their blueprint, in their lifespan, in their decision whether or not to stay here on this earth. Cool. Oh, okay. It's going to have a sip. Question for live streaming. Can Jesus shine more light on the topic of defense mechanisms, on how to reinterpret them in day-to-day use to help us understand them deeply? Apparently, all other topics given in ACIM related to most human concerns have already been covered in most of the sessions, but I could not find this topic being touched upon. Defense mechanisms. Very good. We'll ask Jesus this one. You are blessed beings indeed, and your journey here into separation can be a very, very frightening one when you believe you are a body. And really, this is what most of your defense mechanisms are related to. They are related to keeping the body safe, keeping the body warm, keeping the body protected, preventing people from hurting you, preventing potential weather systems from hurting you, preventing trees falling down from the skies landing on you. We want to remind you that one of the fundamental purposes of the ego mind is to keep your body alive, because your ego is associated with your body. So this sense of separate self that you have and that you are experiencing, which is at times uncomfortable and painful because you believe you're absolutely separated from everything. The body and the ego are inextricably entwined. So the ego, in an effort to stay in the separated state, in the nightmare that it has created, is obsessive about keeping the body safe. And this is where the defense mechanisms come from. So the other thing that you must remember is that the default setting here in separation is not love. That means that over time here, you're going to identify with separation. You are going to feel safer if you're alone. You're going to feel angry if people step over your boundaries. Many, many different demonstrations of separation are at play here. Love also travels through you, but it is not the default setting here. And this is why it disappears so early. You will see little babies being very loving. You will see little children being very affectionate. It is indoctrinated out of you very, very early. And yet the ego mind, with its defensiveness, exacerbates the feeling of separation and loneliness and isolation. And over time, it becomes more and more painful for you. Now, defense mechanisms are of the ego, but we must remind you again that we have to teach you where you are. So if you've been living in a very violent neighborhood, for example, perhaps you were raised in a family that was not loving and they would smack you or punish you, you have got a lot of defense mechanisms that have been practiced by your ego for a very long time because it wants to keep your body alive. And you cannot fault the ego for that it is doing its job. And when you are alive, you have the opportunity to wake up. And so being alive is a very, very good thing. So we're not totally trashing the ego here. We're just saying that that's its focus, to keep you alive so that it can stay alive and that you can have this experience here. So expressing separation is the fundamental frequency of this place. That means the fundamental frequency of this place is to defend yourself. And so you do. When you begin these lessons, when you begin these teachings, you come to these teachings often from a place of suffering, from a place of seeing that the separated default setting here is not that much fun. It's not creating an experience you want. You perhaps can't find love. Perhaps you've fractured many relationships because of your unloving ways or their perceived unloving ways. And so you come to these teachings when you're tired and you are looking for a new way of being. There must be another way. But your defense mechanisms have been deeply indoctrinated into you because of your survival instinct. So even though we say become defenseless, we understand that you cannot just do that. We understand that that will seem extremely dangerous to the untrained mind. We understand that you would say, well, if I'm not defending myself, no one else is going to look after me. That's a very, very powerful statement when you think about it. It shows you the true depth of your separation from other beings. The belief that if you don't do it, nobody will do it. And for many of you, that is a true experience. You are experiencing that on this plane because everybody's deeply indoctrinated into individuality, selfishness, self-centeredness, all of these things. So we want you to know that defense mechanisms are that. They are designed to keep the body alive by the ego, and they will be very, very powerfully hardwired into your system if you have been in danger in any way, shape, or form, which is all of you on this on this world. It's a dangerous, unloving, unforgiving place. So you know, as little children, that if you do something naughty in class, you might be shamed and ridiculed. You might be sent to the headmaster's office and given punishments. You may get home and your parents find out you did something wrong. You may be punished all over again. This is very traumatic for a little child, and you will defend against that happening again with all your might, because it was a terrifying and a traumatic experience for you. And so the next day when you go to school, after having that awful day of being naughty, being told off, being punished maybe multiple times, you will go to school the next day and your ego will have developed a defense mechanism to keep you safe in a very, very unsafe environment. And so the next time your friend leans over from their desk and says, hey, let's do this, you remember the terror of the punishment because you were naughty before, and you may just stiffen up your little body and you may just look at the teacher and you ignore your friend and shut down that relationship because it's threatening you. That defense mechanism, unless you undo it, will go with you through the rest of your life because it was hardwired into you through trauma. And you may, for the rest of your life, be fearful of getting in trouble and you won't even know why. You may go through the rest of your life defending against chatty people who you perceive as dangerous because that was a chatty friend that got you in trouble. You may not even know you do it, but it's hardwired into you through a traumatic experience. One little example of a defense mechanism being formed. How do you undo that defense mechanism? Well, one of the ways that you begin to undo it is you have to suffer its consequences for a while. So you may be shut down. You may not be very friendly. You may be fearful of authority. And all of these things will play out in your experiences because you hold those beliefs in your mind very, very firmly from the time you were little. And so you will seem to get punished from outside a lot. You will seem to get in trouble a lot. You will seem to be annoyed by people a lot. These may become very, very dysfunctional as you become older because you are still acting as if you're in a classroom getting in trouble, even though you're a 25-year-old and it's not happening anymore. But usually it is the suffering of anxiety, mental distress, dysfunctional relationships that gets you finally to a place where you can admit something's wrong here. Something I'm doing keeps creating chaos or dysfunctional relationships or fear, and I have to look at it. So a lot of you don't really get to this point until you are in therapy or you are addicted to something, or you've lost a couple of marriages, or you've lost the custody of your children, or you are drinking yourself into oblivion every night. It is a tricky place here because you aren't taught about these things. If you're taught about these things, then you would be treated in a different way in your school systems, in your families. So it's really a hard thing to undo because you've got to reap the rewards of that fruit for a little while before you understand what's going on. So when you are going through your day now, I'll give you a practical example here. When you are going through your day now, listen to those little prejudicial thoughts that are in your mind. Oh, I don't want to talk to that person. They look a bit dodgy. You think, oh, okay, that's a defense mechanism. What am I defending against? Go beneath the form. Okay, you felt resistance to that particular person. Why? Oh, they've got a different skin color than me. Oh, okay. I'm a little bit frightened of that person. Where could that be coming from? Oh, okay. People of that skin color are often portrayed as criminals in televisions and movies and stuff that I've watched. Okay, I've been indoctrinated into that defense mechanism. How do you, first of all, you have to see it. First of all, you have to acknowledge it. First of all, you have to just say it's there. I may not be happy about it, but there it is. Then you can begin to deconstruct it. So when you come to see that you have a defense against a particular race or color or type of person, homeless person, rich person, it can be anything, you'll feel it as I need to avoid that. I need to keep away from that to be safe. Go beneath the form. Ask yourself, safe from what? Why? Where did it come from? Then you can accept that it's there, and then you can begin to counter that defense mechanism. You can begin to look for people of that particular ilk that are not threatening, that are not frightening. For example, back to the artist question, you can begin, if you find yourself resisting being an artist because it seems a bit unstable and a bit dodgy to you, you can start looking at artists that are successful, that are sane, that are wealthy, that are doing very beautiful work, rather than looking at the alcoholic, unsuccessful artist that may strengthen your defense. Look at the successful one. Make yourself change your view of reality. Make yourself reframe the story so that you are not just in an echo chamber, only looking at the things that you already believe to be true, which is what most people do in unconsciousness. It is consciousness that requires you to question. It is consciousness that requires you to say, hey, there must be another way of looking at this. So that is the way that you can do it. Feel defenses make you withdraw, shut down, avoid. Whenever you feel that feeling, that's a defense mechanism. What am I defending against here? Oh, I'm defending against my own freedom. Interesting, because that can happen too. You can defend against things that you actually want. But it will always come through as a limiting, fearful, avoiding activity. So many of you have many, many, many defenses. We can't get them taken down all at once. You would crumble into a little amoebic ball of mush. They make you think you're safe, but they can be deconstructed. And as you go closer and closer towards love, you will have fewer and fewer and fewer defenses. And that really is what love is in the end. It is that point when you are willing to trust and open, knowing that you're going to be okay. That's what getting rid of your defenses is. So none of you are in that stage, we would suggest. So you all have some work that you can do on your defenses. One of the places that you can also practice is in not defending your opinion. When you get into a situation where you really, really disagree with someone, is to not defend your opinion, because that is a place from the ego. Now, the ego mind will say, well, that's going to be a boring life if I never argue with anyone, if I never dispute anything. We're not saying that you shouldn't do it forever. We're just saying do it as an experiment. See what your ego tells you when you don't argue your point, when you listen to the other person's opinion, actively listen in an effort to understand their point of view. Perhaps they are right and you are wrong, but you never listen because you're too busy arguing. These are ways that you can have fun with your defense mechanisms. Good. Okay. All right. Okay, so somebody asked, hang on, I missed it. Oh, here it is. Could you speak about facing discomfort and how to go about unconscious beliefs and thoughts that block your awareness of light? I think maybe how to go about getting rid of unconscious beliefs and thoughts that block your awareness of light. When I do the lessons, it sometimes gives relief, but something remains hidden. Oh, I think they covered this in the funnel imagery, talking about the bottom part of the funnel. So I'm going to just, one of the questions we had was about the Guardians messages that's coming through. The Guardians came through for the first time at the Salt Spring Retreat in August. And I've been asked to continue working on the extraterrestrial book, which I've been postponing for a while. And so the night before last, I asked to channel a chapter, and the Guardians came through. And they very specifically asked me to post the communication, even though it's for a book. And they asked everyone to share it who's brave enough to share it. So they're being quite pushy, actually. So I'm going to ask Ananda more about the Guardians. We're with you again, dear ones. As dear Jesus addressed in the opening statement, now's the time for these communications to come through, because disclosure's coming. And it is time for all of you to face your discomfort around extraterrestrials, including you, dear one. It is time for all of you to open up to the higher frequency beings who have telepathic abilities that can connect with you. It is time to entertain these ideas. You don't have to channel these beings. You don't have to understand what's happening, but we want you to begin to entertain these ideas, because you are going to have more and more and more contact. The systems that are keeping and have kept these things secret and away from the general population are crumbling. And so just as a dike crumbles and allows water to come rushing through, so the system that's been keeping the secret is crumbling, and that secret is going to come rushing through. So open up to these communications if you can. If not, you are free to hold on to your defense mechanisms. You are free to hold on to your beliefs as long as they make you happy. There is no imperative here for any of you to do anything you don't want. You must use your free will as you see fit. Some of you will not like the messages, will only like Jesus and Ananda, but we will tell you aspects of us are extraterrestrial beings, and we've been telling you that from the beginning. We've not been emphasizing it, but it is in the earliest of the early teachings that aspects of us are high frequency extraterrestrial beings. So that may have slipped past your radar a little bit, and we didn't make a big deal of it because we knew that it would shut some of you down. So don't let extraterrestrial communication shut you down. This being is only allowed to transmit information from high frequency beings who have the evolution of humanity as their purpose. That is our mandate as her gatekeepers. So if you believe in us and have benefited from our teachings, have enjoyed our books, and have loved this communion that we share, then you have a strong and firm foundation of trust in us to know that we are telling you the truth. We are telling you the truth that no low frequency messages can come through this being. And the expansion of this reality is not spiritual. It is not unevolved in any way. It has been unevolved in the secrecy. What you've been living in is the low frequency of hiding and telling lies. This new expansion is more loving because it's more truthful. So you have to redefine your definition of spiritual a little bit here as it relates to extraterrestrial beings, that somehow they are not spiritual. That is a prejudice. It is a defense mechanism based on your society's teachings, based on your society's conspiracy to keep you ignorant of your galactic brothers and sisters. So we thank you for joining us in this live streaming transmission. Our dear one is very happy to be back. She loves her trips into exciting landscapes to meet new students and teachers and to facilitate these lessons. She appreciates all of you very much. That she feels quite a lot of joy when she sees your names popping up in that chat screen. So we wanted to let you know that. She doesn't always have the time to do that. This is a multi-tasking thing that she does here, handling questions in her own consciousness, channeling, handling her computers. And so she is keeping a lot of balls in the air here and sometimes does not get to express her gratitude to all of you. So we will do that on her behalf today. And we thank you, and we will see you again soon. All right. Okay. We are at 11:25. We've done just about an hour and a half, so I'm going to end it there. I want to thank all of you for joining me, and we will do. Oh, hang on, Sedona. I'll try and do a live streaming when I'm in Sedona, but it might be on a different day because I think the Sunday in 2 weeks I will be teaching. So be prepared to have it on a different day. It might even be a weekday. So be prepared for that change. And when you get your email, make a note of it because it will be different. I know that in 2 weeks I am teaching. So we'll do it a little after, but within the 2 week time frame. Thank you all very much, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.